Welcome back to World of Warships with Bucketeer. Today we're going to be taking a look at the USS Pensacola, the American Tier 7 light or heavy, depending on who you ask, cruiser. The Pensacola is the first American cruiser to get 8-inch guns, and let's take a look at how she fares. Commissioned in 1928, the Pensacola was the first of the American treaty cruisers, built under the limitations of the Washington Naval Treaty, which limited cruisers to less than 10,000 tons displacement and 8-inch guns or less. The Pensacola's designers wanted to give her a heavy armament of 8-inch guns, but in order to fit within the treaty limitations, that meant sacrificing armor. As built, the Pensacola's only had 4 inches of belt armor or less, which left them vulnerable to 6-inch light cruiser guns. Consequently, they were commissioned as light cruisers because under the American system, armor counted for as much as the main battery. In 1931, they were reclassified as heavy cruisers to keep up with international conventions in the London Naval Treaty, in which cruisers with 8-inch or larger guns were classified as heavy cruisers. The Pensacola's were armed with 10 8-inch guns in 4 separate turrets. The Pensacola's were somewhat unique in that they had 2 different sized turrets for their main armament, a 3-barreled turret super firing over the 2-barreled turret. This was done in order to keep the lines of the ship slim so that you could remain quick. However, this led to the boats being excessively top-heavy and very poor sea boats. Only 2 ships of this class were built, the USS Pensacola, CA-24, and the USS Salt Lake City, CA-25. The USS Pensacola served admirably during World War II, amassing 13 battle stars in total. During the early part of the war, she served primarily as an AA escort for the carriers. This changed, however, during the Battle of Tasafranga, also known as the Fourth Battle of Savo Island. Savo Island is a small island off of Guadalcanal. The stretch of water between Savo Island and Guadalcanal is also known as Iron Bottom Sound because over the course of 5 months, 49 ships were all sunk in the same 30 square miles of ocean. This pass was of vital strategic importance because it was the primary route by which the Japanese were supplying their troops on Guadalcanal. The Americans meant to take the island, and the best way to ensure that would happen would be to cut the Japanese off from their supply line. Consequently, the Americans established a heavy naval blockade and came into direct conflict with the Japanese during their resupply attempts. During the Fourth Battle of the Savo Island, USS Pensacola had to turn hard to avoid colliding with 2 other American cruisers. Unfortunately, in turning to avoid collision with these ships, she silhouetted herself against a burning American ship in the background. This made her a prime target for the Japanese, who opened fire on her. As the obvious target, she became the focus of the Japanese attack, and she suffered a heavy shelling. However, most of the damage came when she took a torpedo hit just forward of her number 3 turret that disabled 3 of her gun turrets and ruptured her oil tanks. Aflame and heavily damaged, the Pensacola turned away, and after 12 hours of gallant work, her crew were able to extinguish the fires, and the Pensacola was saved, though she had lost 125 men. While a tactical victory for the Japanese, the U.S. ships still managed to discourage the Japanese from landing much-needed supplies for their troops on Guadalcanal. The Pensacola herself limped her way back to Allied ports to make temporary repairs before finally arriving back in Pearl Harbor in late January of 1943. After repairs, the Pensacola returned to service as a carrier escort and took part in numerous bombardments of Japanese positions in support of U.S. amphibious assaults. She survived the war and took part in Operation Crossroads, the testing of the U.S. nuclear weapons at Bikini Atoll in 1946. She survived the nuclear bombing, and after radiological and structural study, she was sunk off the coast of Washington as a target in 1948. Alright, enough history. Let's take a look at the Pensacola endgame. First, we'll take a look at the survivability. The ship has 34,300 hit points, which is about middle of the road for its tier, but you're about 5,000 hit points behind the Miyoko. The armor is the real killer. The Citadel armor of the Pensacola, like I said, is only about 4 inches, and it's in a very narrow band right along the waterline. And that's trying to protect a Citadel that runs probably about 80% of the length of the ship. There's a lot of Citadel, not a lot of armor, and you're going to get penetrated constantly. Furthermore, because of the thin 3/4 inch end caps of the Citadel, as long as the very thin armored deck, even if you angle, you're still going to get penetrated a lot of the time from directly the head, and anything that comes in plunging is just going to go right through you. The end result is this thing has earned its reputation as a floating Citadel, and you're going to take a lot of damage in this thing. And just a last little bit of a kick in the teeth, 7% torpedo damage reduction. This is not a ship that can take being shot at. All right. Now we'll take a look at the guns. I mean, if the armor's terrible, then logically you'd usually expect the guns to be pretty good, right? Well, no. You've got 203mm 8-inch guns, and they have a reload time of 15 seconds, and they have a turret rotation time of 30 seconds. Not very good. They fire out to a range of 15.7 kilometers and have a dispersion of 141 meters. Your high explosive shells do 2,800 damage with a 14% chance to set fires, and your AP shells do 4,600 damage. It doesn't sound that great, but coming off of the Cleveland, that's definitely improvement. The problem comes when you start comparing this thing to your tier mates. Range-wise, you do have a very tiny advantage over the Miyoko, a good 100 meters. But the Shores outranges you by 1.1 kilometers, and the York by 1.6. The dispersion, you're only separated by about 3 meters, but again, their longer range means that if you're both firing at each other from the same range, their grouping is going to be tighter than yours. And the real killer is the DPM potential. The Shores is a monster because it gets those rapid fire 6 inches, so we're not really going to take a look at that one. But when you compare it to the Miyoko, this is really pretty terrible. The Miyoko has an 8-inch gun, but its HE shell does 3,300 damage, which is 500 more than yours, plus it has 17% chance to start a fire. And the AP shell does 4,700 damage. Plus, the Miyoko has a faster reload at 13.95 seconds. And I just don't get it. I did some research on the actual shells, and the Miyoko early in the war did actually fire a slightly heavier shell than the Pensacola, which would make sense for the AP, but why does it get a HE shell that's almost 20% higher damage, plus the greater fire chance? I have no idea. And the guns fire faster. And the Miyoko has torpedoes, 6 per side with a 10-kilometer range. So why in the world does the Pensacola have those guns? And then you go compare it to the York, and you just go to Crazy Town. Because the York's 210mm guns, which are slightly larger, have an AP shell that does 5,500 damage, 20% higher, for an only slightly heavier shell. Not to mention, it reloads every 12 seconds. So with that massive damaging AP shell, plus its rapid fire, plus the longer range, and the tighter dispersion, the York just completely dominates the Pensacola when it comes to DPM. And that's with the York only having 8 guns and the Pensacola having 10. So these guns just do not get the job done. They are easily the worst at its tier. When you take a look at the secondaries, you're doing okay. You've got 8 single 5-inch guns. They're dual purpose, and they got a range of about 4.5 kilometers, which puts you equal with the Miyoko and better than the Shores and the York because they only have 4-inch guns. So you've got a pretty good advantage there. The problem is if you're in secondary gun range, you're dead. With the Pensacola's paper-thin armor, any of the other ships at your tier out DPM you, and they're just going to murder you. So if your secondary guns are firing, you are in trouble. Now, the one place that the Pensacola actually does shine is her AA defense. To start off with, she's got 15 of these single 20mm cannons. She's got 6 of these beautiful quad-barreled 40mm Bofors. And of course, she has those dual-purpose 5-inchers. Now, her long-range AA fire is not quite as good as the Cleveland because the Cleveland has 12 5-inch guns, but all told, it's still a fairly competent fleet defense ship for anti-aircraft, which is pretty good. Not to mention, those 20mm add a lot to the self-defense, and the 40mm are kind of just a good in mid-range, kind of good. They're fantastic. So that is one place where the Pensacola really does have kind of an advantage. All right, taking a look at the Pensacola's maneuverability, she has a max speed of 32.5 knots, which is not bad. That long, fine hull actually did what the designers ever wanted to do and let her keep up her speed. She's half a knot faster than the York, but she's 2.5 knots slower than the Miyoko and 3 knots slower than the Shores. So again, you're not going to be running people down that are equal to you in your tier. A rudder shift time of 7 seconds is actually pretty decent. So you are going to be able to make a fairly decent turn and you've got a 620-meter turning circle. Now, the problem is that long, fine cruiser hull tends to lose a lot of speed in the turns. So if you're actually having to do any kind of hard maneuvering, you're going to bleed speed fast. This is a ship that likes to go in a straight line very quickly, and that's it. Detectability. This right here is the Pensacola's Achilles heel, is your detectability. At sea, 15.7 kilometers. Remember the range of these guns? Yeah, 15.7 kilometers. And that is significantly longer than any other ship at her tier. Now, the problem is that Wargaming does ship detectability based off their height, and the Pensacola's tripod mast is very tall. So as a consequence, you're going to get spotted before anybody else on your team, including most of the battleships. And as anybody who's played World of Warships for even a little bit knows, the first ship spotted gets fired on by everybody. All right, now your detectability by air is 7.8 kilometers, which is actually not too bad for your tier. So you actually can perform your AA role pretty well, provided you're not being spotted by anybody else, usually by another ship. But again, 15.7 kilometer detection radius. You're probably spotted. All right, so that is the Pensacola in port. Let's get her fitted back out, looking pretty and ready to go into a battle. All right, here she is all gussied up. Let's go. All right, here we wind up on a Tier 7 battle on the estuary map. The matchmaker did a pretty good job, and everything actually looks quite balanced. Sadly, estuary's magic waterfalls are no more as of the 5.10 patch. Alright, we're in the southern spawn on the west side, so that's fine. Now I'm going to start off the match by asking our carrier if he wants an AA escort. You never know. Sometimes they get worried about getting carrier sniped, and, well, honestly, AA is the only thing that Pensacola's got going for it. But he's a mute, so forget him. Now, I think from just looking at it on paper, it's fairly easy to see that the Pensacola is probably the worst Tier 7 cruiser in the game right now. But let's be honest, there are a few ships in the game that look like they should be terrible, but actually turn out to be pretty good, just because they have synergy, unexpected synergies in their stats. The Pensacola is not one of those ships. All the stats that are bad work together to make the whole thing even worse. Look at your guns. If you're on a sneakier ship that could get in close, they'd be fine because you'd be able to hammer people down and you can't run away that fast. Lower rate of fire would be okay if you had heavier shells. Your detectability would be fine if your ship was heavily armored or had guns that let you stand off and lob your shots in. Being this thinly armored would be okay if you were sneaky or had, say, a smoke screen. But none of these are true, though. You have short-range, low DPM guns on a ship that's seen from a mile away and can be citadeled by a Kolberg. Each fault compounds the other, making everything worse. And this is only made worse when you wind up in tier 8 or 9 games. This isn't one, and that's part of the reason why that it wound up being the replay that I want to show you. And I am going to show you a fairly good game, and they can happen when you're in the Pensacola. The problem is they rely on the other team not shooting at you, and any ship can have a good game if the other team ignores them and lets them farm damage. Now, since the carrier didn't want an escort, I'm going to tag along with these two Congos and try to provide some AA cover for them. They're both running right up the middle, which is probably a not highly advisable tactic, but I can provide them some anti-aircraft cover because for once there's actually a carrier in this game. Alright. Now, moving along with these Congos, trying to catch up. Congo's a pretty quick battleship, and it shows that the Pensacola is just having issues running them down. I'm checking for shots. Estuary tends to be divided into roughly 4 different arenas, and it's very hard, but it can be done to thread shots between the mountains. But I can't pull that off. So as you can see over there, that enemy Pensacola was identified first and stays spotted even as the rest of his team disappears. I don't have a shot on him yet, and I am gaining slowly on these Congos. And oh, dive bombers appear. Alright, time for the Pensacola to actually do the one thing it's good at. Get in close and try to provide some anti-aircraft cover. Alright, our Independence looks like he's a air defense or air superiority build, so he's going to help out. And between him and my defensive fire, we light those bombers up. Don't really do any damage to the Congo. Looking pretty good. Alright. Got some enemy cruisers spotted, and oh, there's some torpedo bombers. So I keep moving in, trying to stay as close to this Congo as I can so that he can get the defensive fire. Now, it's just positively raining aircraft, which is great. I've already got 8 aircraft kills, 9 aircraft kills. And the Congo turns and only takes 1 torpedo. I'll call that a net win. Now this Furataka just, yep, that island just jumped right out in front of him apparently. Now I try to be careful, and I'm not, and accidentally hit my Congo for a little bit of damage. Sorry. But I also hit the Furataka. So I'm slowing down, hoping that this guy's going to move out from in front of me, and it looks pretty good. Oh, torpedoes coming in. I'll have to deal with that destroyer here in a second, but I just can't help it. 5 shots out towards the Furataka, and oh, 2 Citadels. He is not having a good day. Our Congo is turning, trying to get bow on to the rest of the enemy team over there on the east side. And, well, yeah, this Furataka is just too nice of a target. Shots out, and set him on fire. I'd already switched over to HE to try to get after that destroyer, but the destroyers disappeared. And again, you can see all these other ships are focusing on the Congo, not on me. Oh, somehow the Congo managed to miss at this range, but I don't. And I actually claimed the first blood here. So start trying to get turned around. I'm expecting that destroyer to pop back out of the smoke, but he's nowhere to be seen. He's just scuttled off somewhere else, as has the other Congo. Trying to get turned around. Still worried that I'm going to wind up finding a destroyer in the smoke. And the enemy team has just been running riot with our Congo. I'm trying to get my guns turned around so that I can provide some support, maybe get this destroyer off his back. But our Congo ran himself aground, and much like the Furataka, he is not going to be given the chance to rectify his mistake. Alright, so the shots miss the Mahan, and yeah, our Congo is pretty much done. There's nothing I can do for him. Those dive bombers are coming in, but my defensive fire is still on cooldown, so I'll take some pot shots, but it's just not going to happen. And there goes the Congo. So now I am all alone over here by myself, and I decide I have got better places to be. So I'm going to try to shift south to join back up with the rest of the fleet. Now, why is the Pensacola so bad? Personally, I think that it's just a relic from beta testing. Back in the beta, you really only had the Miyoko to compare it to. And while compared to the Miyoko, it's definitely not very good going ship to ship. You had the advantage of your AA. And back in the beta, carriers were the norm. I mean, you'd have a carrier in virtually every game, usually 2. It was a rarity to not have carriers present. So while you didn't get any real XP or credits for hitting a target or for shooting down aircraft in the beta, at the very least you could provide air cover for people. The problem is that's beta. This isn't beta anymore. And in the current state of the game, carriers are just not present. So really the only thing that the Pensacola can do very well, provide anti-aircraft escort, is no longer relevant. So while back in the beta, the one thing you could do did make somewhat of a difference, it doesn't anymore. And with the introduction of the Russian and the German ships, they've just gone off and completely walked away from the Pensacola. Now, as you can see, I'm starting to take some long-range shots here at that Omaha and the Pensacola, trying to set some fires on the enemy battleships, and I'm shaking my big American butt trying to keep that thing away from the enemy shells. Again, I don't want to take a hit. I'd much rather dodge the fire than try to tank it. And I've managed to join back up with most of the fleet, and I'm ready to provide them with an anti-aircraft escort or try to lob some shots in here. And that's what you're going to see one of the difficulties with the Pensacola. I'm where I need to be for this ship, its theoretical role of providing AA escort, secondary fire to take out destroyers and other things for the fleet. But the problem is that my guns are so short-ranged, I actually have to leave the fleet behind in advance just to get my guns firing. So the whole idea of sitting back and playing a support role, your guns are just too short-range to do it unless the rest of your team is willing to push up. So as we can see here, I see this Pensacola, and he's the only thing in range, and I doubt it's actually going to do anything, but I take a speculative shot anyways, and whomp. I managed to nail him. Go figure. Alright, so here's that destroyer that caused so much problems for our Congo. And empty the AP out of the tubes, get the HE loaded. Since right now I'm trying to deal with this destroyer and put some more fire on these battleships, HE is where it needs to be. Alright, shots coming in. And I send some of my own out towards the battleship. And yep, right there. Took a solid hit, but it actually didn't manage to do much, and I got a fire started on him. So, good news. Well, it looks like he's dead, so I should fire to the destroyer. And surprise, surprise, that Congo over there, he's not dead. Yeah, he managed to get his damage control ability off fast enough to put out that fire. Everybody had shifted their shots away from him, and now it's a feeding frenzy. Everybody realizes he's alive, and now everybody's going to try to get the killing blow in on him. So you can see my shots going in, the rest of the shots from the rest of the fleet coming in, but I don't manage to ninja that kill. So now we have an Omaha and the Mahan over there doing their best to get after our guys, and as you can see from looking at the mini-map, I have more or less run off on my own. Now, here's this little destroyer on our team, and I see these dive bombers coming after him, so I turn towards him. He keeps coming towards me, kick off my defensive fire, set those dive bombers as the target, and just maul them. Again, the Pensacola's one thing that's really good at is anti-aircraft protection, and this game I really actually got a chance to do it. I'm about 50 games in on the Pensacola, and the number of times that I've actually got to do this really provide that anti-aircraft escort for my team. I could probably count them on one hand. So, alright, here we are. The enemy team, after that Congo went down, is hurting down here. Now this Omaha is running for that smoke screen, but he's not going to make it. I'm firing AP, he's firing HE, and I am bow onto him, so he does not have much of a target for me while he is just driving broadside. Alright, get some shots out. Get a good solid hit. Now I swing the aft of the ship out to get some shots out of the rear turrets, some more damage. He is not feeling nearly as brave as he was about 2 minutes ago. And he's trying to swing back and forth. But I've seen the wiggle from many other ships. And there we go. 2 Citadels, he's gone. Now our Mahan popped his torpedoes off at long range, and my catapult fighter has managed to spot him pretty early for me, so it's very easy to dodge, and I start trying to put him out of his misery. Now, again, I'm really not being engaged by most of the enemy team. That Nagato over there just did not care one little bit about shooting at me, so I was left with pretty much just the Omaha. And then the Omaha was pretty much dead, and the Mahan starts in on me. And oh, ouch, that hurts. But I'm able to take the Mahan out while this Pensacola is coming after me. Oh, sorry, spoilers. Yep. Alright, get the shots lined up. He's turning. Correct my lead. Get my shots off. I've already switched. I'm firing AP, but he's pretty much dead anyways. And, oh, now he's officially dead. Now I'm against the enemy Pensacola. So I've turned away to try to minimize the profile he's got to shoot at. And again, he drives broadside onto me. So this isn't really an example of the Pensacola not being able to take a hit. It's this guy not really knowing how to drive his Pensacola. Or me, for that matter. He takes a Citadel, I get a fire started, but I immediately put it out. I am too low health to actually be able to sit here and try to let that burn. So he turns, more shots out. And the Nagato's not shooting at me, and this guy is it. So I'm going to actually take a chance and try to get myself turned back around and start closing the range on this guy. Honestly, after that Citadel and watching him melt away, pretty much smell blood in the water, and I want this kill. It's just me and him down here, and I mean to have him. Alright, he's riding the line, and oh, so am I. So I take a speculative ranging shot before I send the rest of my rounds out. Miss him because now I'm riding the border. So take another shot, comically behind on the lead, adjust, and fire again. And hit him, but nothing else. Did some damage to him. Looks like I might have taken his engines out and he repaired them right away. So again, ranging shot, since my 4 batteries out of sequence. Fire the rest of the guns, and boom, there we go. Now, actually, the situation for the rest of the team is doing pretty good. We've done a lot of damage to the enemy, and we've got the control points, so we're right now ticking down towards victory. So I'm going to take a few last shots at this Nagato to try to get some more damage in there. And just firing AP at long range. Oh, yeah, that carrier's right down here, and if I shift my course, I can actually get a few last shots into him. Tickets are counting down pretty fast, so it's debatable if I'm going to actually be able to get a lot of damage done, but hey, who doesn't love getting a carrier at short range, right? So I turn broadside on so I can get every gun firing at this guy. He comes out from behind the island, shots out, more shots out. Farm a little bit more damage, tickets are counting down. Try to get that reload, come on. And, yep, there we go, denied. Still, that was actually a very good game in the Pensacola. As you can see, did 87,000 damage. Sunk, what was that? 4 kills. Yeah, 4 kills, 87,000 damage. This was on a bonus weekend and finished top of my team. This is actually the second best Pensacola replay I've ever had. So, came off pretty well in that game. Again, you can have good games, but they just depend on the enemy not paying you much attention and letting you farm damage. And any ship's going to have a good game in that case. So that was a pretty good game in the Pensacola, and that's pretty indicative of what most of my good games have looked like in this ship. The enemy team not paying me much mind, allowing me to farm them for damage until I can get those one-on-one matchups that I know I can win. So what are my final thoughts? The ship is terrible. Honestly, it is the worst of the Tier 7 cruisers by a great degree, and it just shows all the way through. Now, what can you actually do to make the Pensacola better? And I think the simplest way to do that would be to give her final refit. Towards the end of World War II, the Pensacola put in for refit, and that top half of that tripod mast was chopped right off. Now, if you do that, that lowers the ship's total height by 20 to 30 feet, which, going by Wargaming's usual standards, is going to lower the detection range of the ship by 2 to 3 kilometers. Well, you do that, and all of a sudden she's a much different ship. She's a ship that's not going to get spotted first, that can provide support for the rest of the ships in the fleet without being detected, and it's going to really change the way that the Pensacola plays. Rather than just sitting out there waiting for somebody to shoot you up, you will have a little more flexibility to move around the map. Now, I don't think that's all it's going to take to fix the ship. Personally, I would like to see some changes done, perhaps giving her access to some of the later war 8-inch shells to increase her AP and HE damage a little bit to bring her more in line with the other ships that are tier. But overall, the Pensacola is just a ship that time forgot. It's a relic of the beta that is still around in the game today, and if you want to drive American cruisers, you're going to have to slog your way through it. Now, personally, I have completely researched the ship, and I've got about 47,000 XP into her, but unfortunately, the New Orleans is 110,000 XP, which means I've got another 63,000 XP to grind for this ship, and I am not looking forward to it. And honestly, that's probably the most damaging thing I can say about this ship. I am not looking forward to sailing it anymore. Unlike the New Mexico, where I didn't mind playing her all the way through, and I still play her quite happily and enjoy it, I'm not enjoying my games in the Pensacola. Sorry, she is just not the ship for me. Alright, that about wraps it up for this review. I'll see you guys next time.